The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
It's a complete disaster. Nicole is way too unstable to value a home such as this one. However, we are at least present to keep it safe. My mother's words came through my cell phone with perfect clarity. It was a live stream from the living area's security camera. I sat inside my freezing vehicle, 50 feet away in the shadows, watching them celebrate with my expensive Cabernet. They believed I was trapped in a psychiatric unit. They didn't realize I had the master keys for the entire estate. "The protection job is finished, Mom," I whispered. I pushed the button for a system reset. At once the whole lodge went pitch black. Inside the building the electricity died instantly. There was no flickering. It was a complete power failure. The cozy, bright light from the chandelier disappeared, turning the big room into a place of grey shadows. On my smartphone screen, the live video from the camera on the shelf flipped over to infrared mode. I observed my father stand up and tip his wine glass over. The dark liquid leaked across the table like black ink, but no one tried to wipe it up. They were too busy looking down at their cell phones. My sister is an influencer. She spends her whole life looking at a screen, yet she never took the time to update the default email for the smart home hub. It only took me one click to get it back. I did more than just cut the signal. I switched the router to a hidden network that I had set up some days ago. Inside, their phone screens died. There was no signal and no web access, but here in my car, my dashboard stayed fully lit. I was streaming every single moment of their fear in high definition. I swiped my thumb over the next command, security lockdown. Even through the thick window glass, I could picture the heavy metal bolts clicking into place. The front door, the back door, and the garage entrance were all locked. Then I touched the climate control. I turned the digital wheel down, 70, 60, 50. Outside, the Lake Tahoe wind was screaming at 10 below zero. Inside, the furnace made a small hum and then went quiet. The silence in that building must have been terrifying. Watching my mother wrap her expensive shawl closer around her shoulders brought back a memory so strong I could taste the bitterness. It happened last Christmas. I had walked into the mudroom without making a sound, shaking the snow from my boots when I heard her voice coming from the kitchen. She was talking to my aunt, using that sad, tragic tone she had practiced for years. "We need to keep the legal papers in our names," she had said. "Nicole is very fragile. You know how she acts. If we let her handle an asset like this, she would probably sell it for drugs in a week. We are doing this to keep her safe from herself." I had stood there completely still with my hand on the handle of the door. Drugs. I have never used a drug in my entire life. I have a high-level federal clearance for my career. I spend my days checking for complex insurance fraud, but the truth did not matter to my family. They required a specific story. They needed to have a villain so they could act like the heroes. They destroyed my reputation just to justify stealing my house. They turned me into a ghost story about an addict, just so they could feel good about living in my home by the lake. That memory felt hotter than the car heater I had just turned off. On the screen I saw my sister holding her phone up against the window glass, trying very hard to find even one bar of signal. It was no use. The lodge was constructed with heavy stone and glass that was reinforced. Without the Wi-Fi bridge, the place was like a metal cage. They were stuck in the dark and the cold, with no audience left to watch them. I fixed my heated seat and took a drink of my coffee. They claimed they wanted to protect the house from me. Fine. Now they were locked inside of it, and I was only getting started. Inside the lodge, the panic was starting to find a rhythm. I watched the infrared video as my father slammed his hand against the wall panel for the thermostat. Nothing happened. My sister was holding her phone high in the air, walking in circles like she was trying to catch a signal with a butterfly net. They looked confused, annoyed, and maybe a little scared, but they didn't look guilty yet. They made a huge mistake when they targeted me. They forgot what I do for a living. I am a senior fraud investigator. I don't just look at numbers, I look at behavior. I track the tiny tremors in a money timeline that scream theft. When I finally looked at my own life through that lens, the picture was very clear. I opened the file on my passenger seat just to remind myself. It was heavy. There was $38,000 in credit card debt. It was opened in my name and signed with a fake signature that was so lazy it was insulting. That was my father. He needed loans for businesses that never existed. Then there were the withdrawals. $9,500 every single month was taken from the trust my grandmother left me. My mother labeled them management fees. She was managing my money right into her own closet. For years I let it happen. I told myself it was normal to help out my family. I told myself I was being generous, but I wasn't being generous. I was being slowly boiled alive. People always ask, why didn't you leave sooner? It is like the frog in the boiling water. You don't notice the heat rising until your skin is already peeling. For me, the water boiled 3 years ago. I was driving home in the rain, exhausted from a double shift. I hydroplaned and the car flipped over. I woke up in the emergency room with a concussion and a shattered bone in my shoulder. The pain was white and sharp, but the talk with the billing nurse hurt much worse. I am sorry, Nicole, she had said, looking at her clipboard. Your health insurance was cancelled last month for non-payment. I lay there strapped to a board trying to process it. I sent my parents the money for the premium every month. I had never missed a transfer. It wasn't until weeks later that I found the bank trail. They had taken the insurance money for a dealership deposit. My sister wanted a new Mercedes G-Wagon for her brand image, and my safety was the down payment. But that wasn't the moment I broke. The moment I broke was 10 minutes later in that hospital bed. My phone buzzed on the plastic table. I reached for it, expecting a message from my mother asking if I was alive. It was a text from my father. What is the code for the wall safe again? The battery died. No, are you okay? No, we are coming. It was just a demand for access. I stared at those bubbles on the screen until my tears stopped. I realized then that I wasn't their daughter. I was a resource. I was a host and they were the parasites, and they would feed until there was nothing left of me but a husk. I looked up from the file in my lap. On the screen my father was packing. He was wearing his expensive coat, the one he bought with my credit line. He looked angry. Good, he should be. I had spent 3 years planning this night, documenting every theft, every lie, and every forged signature. I wasn't the daughter who lay in that hospital bed anymore. I was the bill collector, and tonight the debt was due. On the screen the temperature readout dropped another degree to 48. Inside the lodge the movement changed. It wasn't just panic anymore, it was the frantic motion of trapped animals. They tried the front door first. I saw the latch turn. I saw them push out into the snow, but they didn't get far. The driveway is a 1/4 mile long, steep, and covered in ice. At the bottom stands a 12-foot electric gate. I disabled the gate motor 5 minutes ago. They were sealed in. My father stomped back into the main living area with snow sticking to his expensive shoes. He was screaming. I couldn't hear the specific words, but I recognized the rhythm of his voice. It was the same tone he used when he yelled at servers or parking attendants or me. It was the sound of a man who believes everyone is beneath him and gets furious when things don't go his way. He pointed at the thermostat on the wall. He pointed at the internet router. Then his eyes moved to the huge glass doors that led out to the porch. "Don't do it," I said under my breath, grabbing the steering wheel. "Be exactly the man I think you are." He walked over to the fireplace. He ignored the small metal poker and grabbed a thick log of birch wood. My mother grabbed his arm to stop him, but he just shoved her out of the way. That is the thing about people like him. They don't know how to fix problems, they only know how to destroy things. When they lose their power, they don't try to talk. They just explode. He swung that log with everything he had. Crack! The sound didn't reach my car, but the spiderweb of cracks on my phone screen looked beautiful. The strong glass stayed in one piece for a second, which showed that the money I spent building this house was worth it. But he swung again and again. On the third hit, the glass finally broke. Shards of it fell all over the wood floor. A blast of freezing air rushed into the room, making the curtains fly around. I let out a long breath. Until that moment, this was just a private family argument. It was a messy fight about who got to live there and who had the keys. The police hate those kinds of calls. They usually tell you to talk to a lawyer and then they leave. But when that glass shattered, everything changed. My father wasn't just a family member in a dispute anymore. He was an intruder using force to enter a house he didn't own. He had just committed a crime. My sister ran through the broken glass door with her phone in her hand. She must have found a weak signal outside on the porch. I watched her walking back and forth, screaming into the phone. She was waving her free hand at the dark trees. Yes, we are trapped, I imagined her yelling. Someone messed with the house system. They are holding us here, send everyone. She thought she was saving the day. She thought she was the star of her own rescue movie. She had no idea she was actually the main witness for the police. She was calling the cops right into the trap I had set, and she was doing it with a recorded emergency call that proved a crime was happening. I turned the key and started my engine. The car heater began blowing warm air over my cold fingers. It was time to go meet the visitors. The blue police lights flashed through the dark trees like a strobe light. 2 patrol trucks drove up the icy path, their tires slipping on the steep hill that I had purposely not salted. Inside the house they looked so relieved, and it was honestly pathetic. As soon as the siren stopped, my mother ran out of the building. Since the front door was still locked, she had to climb through the broken glass of the porch like a common thief. She waved her arms at the officers, pulling her shawl tight and acting like a helpless victim. "Thank God," she screamed, running toward the first cop. "We are being attacked. Someone broke into the computer system. They locked us out in the cold." My father followed her out, trying to look like he was in charge even though his socks were soaked with snow. "Officer, I want a full report," he said. "This is a computer crime. We have been held here like prisoners in our own home." I picked up the black folder from my passenger seat. It was heavy and felt like a weapon. I opened my car door and stepped out into the freezing wind. The cold bit into me immediately, but I didn't shake. I walked down the driveway, and my boots made a loud crunching sound that made the officer look over at me. "Ma'am, stay back," the cop yelled, putting his hand near his belt. "We have a call about a disturbance here." "I know," I said. My voice was steady in the wind. "I am the person who locked the doors." My mother stopped moving. She turned her head toward me quickly. For a brief moment it looked like she had seen a ghost. Then her expression changed into that fake look of sadness and pity she always used. "Nicole," she said. She turned back to the policeman and lowered her voice so it sounded like a secret. "Officer, this is my daughter. She is having a mental breakdown. We have been trying to get her some professional help. She must be responsible for this. Please try to be gentle with her." The policeman relaxed a little bit. He lowered his shoulders and let out a breath that turned into a white cloud in the freezing air. "Okay, everyone, let's just stay calm. This sounds like a private family matter. If you people have the keys, let's just—" "This is not a private matter," I said. I didn't shout or beg. I walked right past my mother and gave the heavy black folder to the officer. He looked confused and stared at the first page. It was a legal, stamped copy of the property deed. "My name is Nicole," I told him. "I am the only owner of this land and this building. These people are not living here legally. They are not my guests. I officially took away their access 3 hours ago." The policeman turned the page. He saw the log showing exactly when I reset the system. He also saw a copy of the text message I had sent to my father 1 week ago that said, "Do not enter my property again." "Officer, look at the porch," I said, pointing to the sharp pieces of glass where the warm air was leaking out. "That man just used a log to break a reinforced window so he could force his way into a house that doesn't belong to him. That isn't a family argument. That is breaking and entering." My father stepped toward us. His face was a dark shade of purple. "Now you listen to me. I was the one who paid for this place. I put it in her name for tax reasons. She is not mentally well." "Tax reasons?" The policeman looked up from the folder. His face changed. He wasn't bored anymore. He was now looking at my father like a suspect. "Sir, do you have any paperwork to prove you own this, a deed, a power bill with your name on it?" "I have a lease," my father yelled. He started digging through his bags fast. "We signed a lease 3 years ago. It's right here in my bag." "A lease," I said. I looked at the cop. "Ask him to show it to you. Then please look at the 3rd section of my folder." The trap was now closed. The officer took the paper my father handed him. It was a clean, perfect lease agreement that was dated 3 years in the past. It looked real. It had signatures and a notary stamp. Usually a paper like that makes the police leave because they don't know who is telling the truth. "Officer," I said in a calm voice, "please look at the bottom corner of that paper. Do you see those tiny yellow dots?" The policeman leaned in to see. What are they? They are tracking codes, I explained. Every color laser printer makes a tiny pattern that is hard to see. It shows the serial number of the printer and the exact minute the paper was printed. I have a forensic report right here in section 3. I showed him the report I had paid for. It was for the same lease my father was holding. That lease was not made 3 years ago, I said. The codes show it was printed yesterday morning at 10:42 a.m. on the Canon image class printer in my father's home office. My father went pale. It's just a copy, he shouted. We lost the paper we signed before. A file created yesterday, I asked him. The ink is brand new. If this was signed 3 years ago, why didn't the file exist until 24 hours ago? The policeman's face became very stern. Sir, he said, moving closer to my father, do you have any other way to prove you live here? Everything is inside, my father yelled. There is more proof. I have more too, I said, turning to the 4th section. My sister says she lives here, right? I do, she screamed. Yes. While she is also taking money from the state for rent assistance, I said, handing over more papers. For 20 months, she told the government she was a low-income person paying rent to a landlord. That is $21,500 in fraud. The officer looked at the government forms and then at the lease. You can't own a home and get government rent help at the same time, I said, looking at my father. So either that lease is a lie or your daughter is committing a major crime. Which one is it? There was no way out for them. Dispatch, the officer said into his shoulder radio. I need a supervisor out here. We have a case of forgery and fraud. He put the metal handcuffs on my father. My sister didn't cry. She looked around in a panic and then suddenly jumped at my coat. She has drugs on her, she screamed. Search her right now. The officer reached into my pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag with white powder inside. My family looked happy. They thought they had finally won. I took out my phone. There is a camera hidden in that flower pot, I said. I have the live video right here on my screen. The officer watched the video. He saw my sister reach into her clothes, pull out the bag, and shove it into my pocket before she started screaming. He watched the video twice times. You are under arrest, he told her, putting the cuffs on her wrists. My mother stood there, unable to move, as her husband and daughter were put into the back of 2 different police cars. Get off my property, I told her. The tow truck showed up a few minutes later. Since my father's tags were expired, they hooked up his BMW and drove away. My mother was left standing alone in the snow with no way to leave. I walked back inside my house and put boards over the broken glass door. I poured myself a drink of wine and opened the computer folder that said Case 894. It was 3 years of evidence against my family. I moved the whole folder into the trash bin. The house was finally quiet. It felt cold and clean. I took a sip of my wine.